forever, basically. When your computer was old and outdated, you would buy a new one, right? Well, now people have Windows 7 computers, Windows 8 computers that they bought, 5, 6 years ago. Some of them even you could have bought them close to 10 years ago now. And well, not really that long ago, but more like 5, 6 years ago. I think we'll call 8 the max. You could have bought it a while ago, is the point. And then you have the Windows 10 upgrade that came out this year and some of last year. And suddenly you have all these people who have old computers who are updated to the new software. So they think their computers are perfectly fine and functional. And it's kind of interesting how that works because now people aren't buying new computers because they have the Windows 10 upgrade and they think that they're up to date. And keep in mind, too, you think, well, there aren't that many Windows users. Windows computers make up a majority of the home computer market. It's not even 50-50. It's a huge margin. And Macintosh, I think, is somewhere around 10 to 20% of the home computer market. They're doing better. Most people who have laptops have Macs, and most people who have desktop computers will have will have Microsoft software on their computer, usually a Dell or a Lenovo or an HP. Those are the big brands. And interestingly enough, Apple computers have some of just a little bit of all of that inside them. So it's kind of interesting how that works out too. But Windows 10 is being blamed for a continued drop off in system shipments and flat IT spending because, again, people think that they're updated and they're good to go when in actuality they probably aren't. Windows 10 is a big upgrade over Windows 8, I would say. I didn't like 8 at all. 7 was great. I think 7 is the next best thing to XP. Windows XP was certainly a good operating system. It at the time was the best Windows that had come out next to maybe 2000, because 2000 was a wonderful operating system. Not the best, but it was really good. And then you had XP that was, again, really good, especially compared to ME and NT. And NT was pretty good, too. And then you had Vista. And Vista gave a lot of people a lot of problems. Vista was, it had problems, but it wasn't terrible. And then you had 7, which was really what Vista should have been in the first place. Then you had 8, 8.1, 8.5. Now we've got 10. And by the way, just a little bit of trivia here. There is a reason why they skipped 9 and went straight to 10. Some legacy software, when you run it on Windows 10, or if you were to run it on an operating system called Windows 9, some software will only look for 9 when it's checking what operating system you're using, because it's designed to work with 98 and 95. So if it sees a 9 in the name of the operating system, it's going to think you're running Windows 98 or 95 and not work. So the reason they skipped 9 and went straight to 10 is because of that. It's kind of a weird technical reason as to why they did that, but that is why they did it. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240 and hotnewstalkradio.com. Number to call in is 423-800-8949. You can watch us live on YouTube right now. Actually, we're live on YouTube. Go to youtube.com, search for Hot News Talk Radio, and you can see our live stream here from Hot News Talk Radio. You can see the studio. You can see my shirt that I'm wearing, which is actually way too heavy for the weather that we're having. It was 71 degrees when I came into work today at 5:30 in the morning, and now it's getting up to 90-something, and I feel like I'm going to burn alive in this heavy flannel shirt. So maybe I can't take it off because we have a whole no shirt, no shoes, no business thing going on here, although I rarely ever wear shoes because I have terrible feet problems. I should probably keep my shirt on because I'll look like I'm ready for a wrestling match or something if I take my shirt off. People think I'm going to start showing off my karate skills, and that's not a good thing because I'm not particularly great at that either. But according to Extreme Tech, Windows 10's launch last year was a huge success for Microsoft. In the past year, the number of systems running Windows 10 has grown enormously, spurred by Redmond's free upgrade offer and a number of less upstanding practices. From a strictly numbers game, however, the shift has been a success. And there are a lot of people, too, by the way, who don't want to upgrade to Windows 10 for a lot of different reasons. One thing that was pointed out is maybe you don't have enough RAM for it, and that's certainly a great point. Maybe you just don't have enough RAM. Now, there is an issue with that, and it's not a particularly big one, but Windows 10 actually does do a system check to make sure your computer at least meets the minimum for running Windows 10. And honestly, if you meet just the minimum, you probably shouldn't be running Windows 10. Just as an example, I upgraded my RAM from 4 to 8 gigabytes, and it made an enormous difference. Sorry, 16. I'm actually running 16 in my system right now, from 4 to 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it made an enormous difference. I was surprised how big of a difference it made, actually. But Windows is a notorious RAM hog, and web browsers are these days notorious RAM hogs. They eat up RAM like crazy. That's why smartphones now have 1 to 2 gigabytes, sometimes 4 gigabytes of RAM in them. Sometimes your phone will have just as much RAM as your laptop does, especially if you bought a netbook. It's going to have just as much RAM as a Chromebook sometimes. So it's crazy how much RAM a lot of things are using, mostly because there's so much RAM to use. So the programmers don't bother to optimize their programs a lot of the time, because why bother? People have 10, they have 2, 4, 16, 8 gigabytes of RAM, so why bother optimizing? If they start having problems, that's not their problem. It's not the programmer's problem. They should just close other stuff. So programs are not made very efficiently these days, and there's a lot of reasons why. I'm not blaming the programmers, because they do a good job most of the time. I'm certainly not a coder. I couldn't do what they do. But it's a little bit frustrating sometimes when Chrome eats up several gigabytes of RAM, and you're kind of wondering why. And, I always have tons of tabs open too, by the way. I've got about 10 at a minimum tabs open on my computer most of the time. Anyway, I've got way too many tabs open. But that's another tip, by the way. If your computer's running slowly, particularly your web browser, and you're kind of wondering why, chances are you've got way too many tabs open on your computer. So maybe try closing some tabs, and that might fix some things on there. But yeah, SpaceX. I love space. I love the idea of space travel. I think we should go to space more often. I think the government really dropped the ball in pulling funding from a lot of the space program that they did. But I will say, I'm not a fan of government spending money on much of anything. And at the time of the space launches, it seemed like government was the only thing capable of going to the moon. And there were a lot of good reasons for going to the moon. I'm not going to complain about something that's already happened that's given us so many benefits, right? Like in the 60s, I probably would have said, well, the government shouldn't be spending all this money on this frivolous activity of going to the moon. What good's it going to do? Yada, yada. Well, actually, it did do a lot of good. It bankrupted the Soviet Union. It gave us a lot of great technology that the NASA people gave a lot of money to different contractors to manufacture. So we're better off. We're better for it. We're better for it because of the space program. It's one example of government spending that I'm actually kind of okay with, and that's really saying something as a very strict free marketer myself. I'm a very free market oriented person. I think government should be out of business almost entirely. Obviously, you can't have it out entirely because corporations are an agreement between a person and the government to create a legal fiction, right? So we understand that there has to be at least a little bit of government, just a tiny bit, for the corporate structures we have to exist today, but still government should stay out of business as much as humanly possible, right? That's my belief anyway, and you're free to disagree, although you'd be wrong. SpaceX in 2016, though, is going to be launching more with better rockets that it can land, according to Ars Technica. One of the most persistent criticisms of SpaceX has been that the rocket companies have kind of an inability to meet the launch commitments, which is to say they don't launch nearly as much as the investors would like. So talk to any of Elon Musk's competitors in the rocket and spacecraft business, and they will say the same thing. SpaceX isn't meeting the demands of its customers. Too much pizzazz, too little substance, so on and so forth. But you wouldn't hear that if you were listening to the ordinary news, because if you watch Fox, CNN, MSNBC, whatever you want to watch, it seems like SpaceX can do no wrong. And you probably think that if you listen to me, too, because I'm constantly singing the praises of Elon Musk and SpaceX. So, it makes sense. To some extent, this jealousy-tinged criticism is valid. In 2014, the company had about a dozen missions on its books, and it only launched 6 times. Now, there is probably a good reason for that. One of the main ones, I'm sure, is safety, because you don't want people dying. And another reason is the cost of equipment, because if one of your rockets blows up, they're really dang expensive. So replacing them kind of costs a lot of money. So I understand them being a little bit cautious over there at SpaceX. A successful launch on Monday would give SpaceX those 7 completed missions this year, setting a new record for the company with still nearly half of the year remaining. Considering the company's launch manifest for the rest of 2016, it is possible the company will make 12 or more flights of its Falcon 9 rocket this year, and it may come close to reaching its stated goal of a launch cadence of once every other week by the end of this year. So we could have a private company launching something into space once every other week by the end of the year. And that's a very impressive launch schedule, which I think is a little bit better than NASA's actually, even in its heyday. NASA was launching a lot of stuff in the air, by the way. Constantly, it was launching satellites. It was launching missions to the International Space Station. There were maintenance missions to different satellites. All sorts of different things were being launched all the time back in the 80s and 90s, especially the 70s. And we just don't have that nearly as much anymore. And I kind of missed that era of space. And honestly, I think a lot of the reason we're not going into space nearly as much as we were before is a lack of optimism. Because in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, especially the 80s and the 90s too, there was a lot of sort of a cultural optimism. Now, the 70s, not nearly as much. In the 70s, it seemed like we weren't going to last very much longer because you had a horrible depression going on in the 70s. You had a horrible president in the 70s. You had an Olympics that was going awry in the 70s. You had lots of things in the 70s that really just didn't work out too well. The music was decent, but that's about all you can say for it. The movies were okay. The fashion was awful. The 70s were kind of a dark time in the United States history. The 60s, awesome. 70s, okay. 80s, awesome. 90s, great. 2000s, all right. 2010s, pretty cool. The 70s are kind of a dark spot. And that's just my opinion, but the 70s seem like kind of a dark spot in a lot of ways. Although the home computer market really did explode in the late 70s, like 77, 78. But the early 70s just seemed kind of dirty, right? Like you watch movies from the 70s and they seem kind of dirty. I don't mean risque. I mean, they just seem kind of gritty and dirty. Like watch The Long Goodbye. That's a dirty, gritty movie. And it's a great movie. But The Long Goodbye to me really does exemplify a lot of the 70s. That and Taxi Driver are two very 70s movies to me. You know, like you watch those movies and you can't help but think, man, that was the 70s. You know, and the 70s are just kind of messed up in a lot of ways because you were coming off of the assassination, the assassination of JFK, RFK, ML King, Malcolm X had been assassinated as well in the 60s. And so the 70s just seemed kind of hopeless. That's my view of it anyway. But things got better. Reagan got into office and everything was fixed basically by the 80s. And plus you had Carter, you had the revolutions in Iran in 79. It's just the 70s were kind of, I don't know. And if you have a bright remembrance of the 70s, that's awesome for you. And I'm very happy for you. I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that's how I see them personally through my glasses that weren't, born yet in the 70s. I might sound like I'm older, but I'm not. Let's just say my experience is mostly with the 2000s. We'll put it that way. But yeah, the 70s just seemed kind of bleak. Then you had the optimism of the 80s, and we're sort of coming off of that ourselves here with a bleak outset. And so we need a little bit more cultural optimism, I think, in our society, because things are constantly looking very bad because we're constantly reading very bad news. Right? Like you have what happened in Baton Rouge and things look pretty bad. You had 3 cops killed, a suspect who was on the run. He was eventually killed by police. And this comes on the cusp of several other police shootings. You have an attempted coup in Turkey, and you have the West falling apart, it seems like. Brexit has just happened, which I see as a very good thing, but others don't. So things are looking to some very bleak right now. And actually, I would say that these occurrences, not so much the cop killings, those are very bad things, but a lot of these occurrences are opportunities, much less disasters, right? Like Brexit is an opportunity, not a disaster. The Turkish coup, while short-term is a disaster, may later be an opportunity for building a more secular, less Islamic state. If Erdogan gets thrown out of office, which I think would be the best option, and you have someone else who comes in who is less likely to lean towards Islamic extremism, then you have a great opportunity in Turkey for perhaps a tourist explosion. I don't mean literal explosion. A tourist explosion. You have an opportunity, of course, for great industry to build there. There's a lot of things that could go right with a Turkish coup. So it's not entirely a bad thing. Also, you have, of course, what happened in France. You have the shooting and the running over of people with a truck in France. So things look very bleak right now. But again, I say these things are bad. right? They're reprehensible. They should not have happened, and yet they did. Of course, we don't know God's plan. These things happened. So what do you do from them? Do we sit around and mope and say, well, this is the end times, or do we try to make the best of it and move on from where we are now? So we need a little bit more cultural optimism, especially locally. Now we're on the cusp. We're just after, I should say, the 1 year anniversary of the July 16th shooting. And that was one of, if not the worst thing to happen here in a very long time. It affected us in Chattanooga culturally in ways that we don't even know yet. Certainly it affected me in a lot of ways. I was reporting on it, not to brag at all, but I was reporting on it very early on. I was on the air for, I think, 6 hours. And I was pretty shaken up for a few days after the shooting. Honestly, I'll admit I was pretty messed up for a few days after that. So I understand not nearly as much as the families of the victims, obviously, but I understand the sort of the lack of optimism you can have after something like that. But things can get better here, and things are getting better here, because look at how the community came together. Look at how things almost immediately got so much better in our outlook, where we said we can overcome these obstacles we have, and we can be better for it. We need more of that attitude, and really only a strong local view can bring that about, because we have all these bad things happening around us and it seems like things are going horribly, but actually I'd say things are only going to get better from here. Well, yeah, disasters happen, and they happen in every decade to every generation, and this generation is not having nearly as many disasters as the one before it. Things are actually getting better, believe it or not. It doesn't seem like it a lot of the time, but things are actually getting better. Think about how things were for people in the 30s and 40s. You had a world war. You had a Great Depression. These people lived through some of the worst times in history and used that to create some of the best times in history with the 50s and 60s. So we can use disasters to rebuild and make things better. And I think here in Chattanooga, we're doing just that. We came out of a horrible disaster, a terrorist attack in our own backyard that affected real people that we know. You know, we know some of the people who were affected by what happened on July 16th, but are we using that as an opportunity to sit around and say, well, things are terrible and we're never going to be better? No, because we're better than that. We're using that as an opportunity to say we're going to rebuild, we're going to be better, and we're going to be more secure, and we're a better people now for it. We're using that as a way to move forward, and that's the opportunity that we have, and that's the way we should be acting. And it comes naturally to us, and it unfortunately doesn't come naturally to a lot of other people. We have that here in the South and here in Chattanooga because we're used to picking ourselves up and moving forward. But unfortunately, a lot of other places, it's not like that. So maybe we should lead by example. And I think we are leading by example. Look at how we've handled everything since it happened. We're actually acting very well, right? Like, we're not calling for death. We're not calling for retribution, right? Like, I didn't see any Chattanoogans forming a militia to go over to, Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia or Yemen. We didn't have that. We had people who were loving, who were caring, who were not calling for death. We had people who were caring for the victims, not calling for beheadings and death. That's us leading by example. And I couldn't ask to live in a better place when you think about it. We've really handled everything so well. It's been really amazing, the response to what we had on July 16th. So that's, I guess, my little spiel on what happened a year ago, several days ago now. As of several days ago, 1 year anniversary of July 16th. It's something that I'll certainly never forget. You can't after living through it. Those of us who were there are not ever going to forget it. I don't mean there personally, in person at the location of the shooting, but I mean those of us who were there sort of mentally, spiritually. We were very, very present at that time. And we are recovering from it. And I think we're almost at a full recovery. Things are getting a lot better. Now, for the victims, for the families of the victims, it's going to be years and years and years, if ever. But for us who were more indirectly affected, I think we are building something a lot better because of our experience there. So it's a very interesting time that we live in. We're going to talk in just a few minutes about the Facebook live feed of CNN in Turkey, the broadcast that was taken over by the military. Could it happen here? Probably not. But it was certainly something that was interesting to view anyway. I've never seen anything like what I saw in Turkey just a few days ago. Very interesting stuff here on Binary Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com as well.
12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
They're soaring worldwide. Prices for gold and silver are soaring worldwide. Rick Davis wants you to take advantage of them. Go to Rick Davis right now. Rick Davis Gold and Silver and get yours today. Your cash, and more cash. Go ahead, take advantage of them. Gold is soaring past $1,350 an ounce. That's 1,350 an ounce. Silver is out of this world too. Buy and sell at Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Gold, silver, jewelry, rings, watches. Rick Davis has got what you want. Right on. Cash, and more cash. Rick Davis has got so much cash it's as tall as a billboard. And he wants to stuff it in your pocket. Cash, and more cash. Yours for the asking. Come on in today and watch metals rise up as high as Rick's billboard. Rick Davis Gold and Diamond, 5301 Brainerd Road. You know where it is. Come get your cash, and more cash. Grimm's Tactical. There's only one place to go for hard-to-find ammunition. Grimm's Tactical. 22 mags and 22 long rifle. Rip Armor ammo. You've got the right to keep and bear arms. And we've got the ammo for those arms. Grimm's Tactical. 22 mag, 22 long rifle. Rip Armor. A wide variety of ammo to fit all of your arm needs. At Grimm's Tactical, you'll be able to lock and load with our wide selection of ammo. Grimm's Tactical. Real men and their women shop at Grimm's Tactical. 8115 East Brainerd Road. Go to grimmstactical.com or call 637-8664. Grimm's Tactical. Like us on Facebook. Grimm's Tactical.
Rubber's tough, but foam rubber is soft. Foam rubber is the star at Stuff It Upholstery, which uses it to revive your couch, your embarrassing easy chair, your boat seat cushions. Stuff It Foam Rubber in Hickson covers Chattanooga and surrounding areas. Don't throw out that favorite easy chair that's grown haggard and barbaric. New life for your seat cushions. Premium auto-grade rubber foam for your restaurant, church, or business. Stuff It Upholstery brings comfort and relief. Go ahead, skid away from flat, dull, and droopy cushions. Relax, restore, revive. When comfort matters, stuff it. 4608 Hickson Pike, 877-1616. Ask for Larry. That's 877-1616.
On your signature, you can get $150,000. Can you believe that? $150,000 on your signature. Hi, I'm Bruce Krebs with the Entrepreneur Source. There's a program right now that you can get $150,000 on your signature with no pledge of collateral or personal guarantee. Call me at 423-875-5621 to learn more. 423-875-5621. You've been thinking about starting a business? Don't do it on your own. I have a proven track record for the last 13 years, a 96% success rate. I can guide you into a franchise where you will pay yourself through the startup phase with very low or little risk. Call me now. I'm Bruce Krebs at 423-875-5621. And make sure to listen to the Entrepreneur Hour every other Wednesday from 11 to 12 o'clock. Call me now, 875-5621.
I'm blowing everything up. We're starting over. I'm doing a new show. I want guys who push it to the middle of the table and go over the top. Take a risk, fail miserably. I'm right, and I'm not wrong, and I'll never back down. Conflict works. Allow it.
It's The Herd with Colin Cowherd. Right here and everywhere. Noon Eastern.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio with your Hot News Now update. A Saudi Daisy man has been sentenced to 30 years in prison after the police say he killed his ex-girlfriend in a shotgun blast and wounded her husband and her child. Saudi Daisy policemen say they got to the scene to find bullet holes in the side of the trailer that they were living in and shotgun shells on the floor. Jeremy Scott Ritchie sentenced to 30 years in prison. A sheriff's deputy in Hamilton County is now recovering from his injuries after a man crashed into his patrol car when he was turning left in a Chevy Silverado on Highway 58. He found an obstruction in the form of the sheriff's office patrol vehicle. The driver and his passenger were not injured, but the sheriff's deputy's car had the side windows and rear windows smashed. The deputy sustained minor injuries. He's expected to be okay. There is now a reward in Hamilton County for anyone who has any information on the killing of a bald eagle. The reward is now $10,000. If you know anything, call the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Special Agents. If it's going on in the Tennessee Valley, it's going on Hot 1240 Hot News Talk Radio.
You give us 12 minutes and 40 seconds, we'll give you Chattanooga and the world.
News Talk 1240.
Expect partly cloudy, hot and humid weather out there through the afternoon. Highs near 95. Just a slight chance of a stray shower tonight. Muggy lows, lower 70s. For Tuesday, a few widely scattered showers and storms will pass through back into the 90s. Drier and hotter for the midweek. Dr. Ron Phillips has released the most important book he's ever written, The Unraveling of America. He pulls back the curtain and exposes those who are pulling the strings and unraveling the fabric of America. Available at Amazon or ronphillips.org. And I'm 1412 Chief Meteorologist Patrick Orr.
On AM 1240, Hot News Talk Radio.
This is Binary on Hot News Talk Radio, and live from the Convention Center, the Republican National Convention in Cleveland, we've got Sam Jordan on the air. Sam, thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
So tell us you're going to be giving us reports, by the way, all through the week here at AM 1240 Hot News Talk Radio. So we're going to be getting live reports, national reports from the Cleveland Republican National Committee. Tell me about the atmosphere that's been sort of in the air right now. We know it's been pretty tense, to say the least. We've got Bikers for Trump down there. We've got the Black Lives Matter. Have you actually witnessed any of that atmosphere yourself?
Yes, when I was first driving in to Cleveland after getting off the interstate yesterday afternoon, Black Lives Matter was the first group that we saw, with the tables selling Black Lives Matter materials, T-shirts, that sort of thing. There weren't a whole lot of protesters until much later in the afternoon, with a lot of the delegates, checking in at their various respective hotels, and the media, was doing a lot of their checking in yesterday as well. And I know the presence of security and the police is really, really super tight. Basically, a 1 mile radius of the Quicken Loans Arena has been blocked off from any vehicular traffic. The only exceptions to that is with police or EMS and fire, and then also with shuttle buses, because a lot of the different news organizations and the delegates, because of the I believe it's over 15 hotels that are basically hosting all the guests, the news media, and others that are directly associated with the convention. They have to have that shuttle bus service. And last night, they were making a shift change, the police were, and at the Chattanooga County Administrative Office building in downtown, about 2 blocks from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they were loading up 3 school buses filled with police officers to go and, distribute throughout the downtown area. And like I said, with that 1 mile radius of the traffic not being allowed to, go about and do their commutes wherever they need to go, it really makes it difficult, for you to get around. I mean, the walking isn't that bad, but, if you're an overweight old guy like me, sometimes you got to make a couple stops and catch your breath or get a drink or something like that. But for the most part, I mean, it's pretty civil as far as with the people. They're not as congenial as what you might think. But last night when we were in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, we got to talk with some of the delegates from various states, a lot of Texas, Nebraska, Ohio, Pennsylvania, that we got to chat with. And it just really, the attitudes that they have there, I mean, it's like, we're here, but we want to go through the process and enjoy the moment. With a lot of them that were making those comments and stuff. But so far, it's been pretty uneventful. I mean, the bulk of the business is going to get started here today, more so in the afternoon, and then leading up into the big day on Thursday when the presumptive candidate, Donald J. Trump, will make his acceptance speech. Governor Pence from Indiana is expected to make his vice presidential acceptance speech as the Republican candidate on Thursday evening. And, for the most part, a lot of speakers, Trump related, whether it's business or family, a lot of representatives and senators from the various states. They're going to be speaking throughout these 4 days. And it should be quite interesting. I mean, today's alone is really going to be hitting on Benghazi with former U.S. Navy SEALs, Marcus Luttrell, and other advocates for, talking about, the American heroes that we've had that have fought for our country and stuff. And it will be another issue that we'll be talking about with various speakers is about the nation's broken immigration system that we'll be hearing about throughout the day today, because they've got themes for each of the days, and today is Make America Safe Again, and there'll be over 24 speakers that will be talking about protecting our country and our citizens by strengthening our military, securing our borders, defeating terrorism, and supporting the people who safeguard our communities.
People kind of forget, too, when you talk about the Republican National Convention, we, especially those of us down here who are a little bit more disconnected, I guess, from the national scene, we kind of forget that it is a convention in a lot of the traditional senses, just with a lot more security. But there are keynote speakers. There's a lot of people talking there. It's not just Donald Trump and Mike Pence who are going to be there, who are going to talk about whatever they're going to do when I get elected. It's a whole conference for the Republican Party. There are a lot of keynote speakers there. I think today, if I'm not mistaken, Melania Trump is going to be talking at the convention. Is that true? That today?
Yeah, she's slated to speak later this evening. Willie Robertson, if you've ever seen Duck Dynasty on A&E,
oh yeah,
he's going to be there. Governor Rick Perry, from the former governor of Texas, is going to be speaking. Scott Baio, a lot of listeners will remember as Chachi on Happy Days, and
Sure.
then eventually Ben Austin and Charles in Charge. He's going to be speaking tonight as well. We're going to be hearing from Pat Smith, mother of Benghazi victim Sean Smith, who was killed during that attack at the U.S. consulate. Also, Mark Geist, John Teagan, Ken Terry and Kelly Terry Willis from the Brian Terry Foundation. A lot of these speakers that I just mentioned are in relation to the Benghazi attack. That is going to be probably some of the biggest part of the day as far as with speeches, and comments that will be made. There's also actors that are going to be, addressing the convention and everything, immigration reform advocates, several of those. Also, the sheriff of Milwaukee County, David Clark, he, is responsible for, getting the Milwaukee Police Department's Intelligence Division to a higher standard that's more in line with the FBI type of tactics and everything, and really taking that by, storm. Also, some authors and commentators. U.S. Senator Tom Cotton from nearby Arkansas is going to be speaking as well. U.S. Senator Jeff Sessions. Melania Trump, the wife of Donald Trump, is going to be speaking, like I said, later on this evening. We've got some former, Army officials that are going to be speaking as well. Just, a whole wide-ranging lineup that's going to be on today's card for the 2,470 delegates and 2,302 alternate delegates from all the 50 states, the District of Columbia, and the 5 territories that we have.
It seems, and maybe I'm just a little bit too young to remember, but it seems like there's a lot more attention being given to this convention than there have been to previous ones. This election seems to be a lot more high stakes for both parties than previous elections have been. Are you getting that vibe too?
Oh yeah, I mean there is quite a bit of tension here in Cleveland, but this has got a lot of implications as far as potentially with Supreme Court nominees and other key positions within the cabinet for the future. It's not just president, vice president that this election, hinges on. It's the future as far as where we're heading, our country, the direction that we're in right now. We're kind of, at a state where we're going forward in this one direction, or are we going to be losing control or direction? I mean, Britain, is getting out of the European Union. The United States, I don't think was necessarily in favor of that, but, what we do here in the United States plays a huge impact in the world, in politics in particular. So, it's not just Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton. There's a lot more at stake as well.
We're talking with Sam Jordan, who's on the ground now in Cleveland at the Republican National Convention, one of the biggest events now of the year, very determining factor for how the rest of the year plays out, politically especially. Very high-stakes election. It reminds me a lot, I'm a little bit of a scholar of history, I like to think sometimes, and it does remind me a lot of how things were 100 years ago, where things were very high stakes. There are a lot of comparisons between 2014 and 1914, just a high-stakes election, very tense time. Of course, we don't have a world war going on yet, but very tense time in world history right now. And this is going to be one of the things that's looked back upon in the history books as a very high-tension time for the American public. Something I want to clear up, by the way, Sam, that we've heard about on social media, that it's hard to get firsthand reports of it, because you see a lot of pictures of different things that are going on at the convention. It's hard to say, because especially nowadays with social media, we didn't have this in 2008 nearly as much. But one thing I want to ask as well about, before I get to my main question, one thing I want to ask about is how was the concert last night, and how was the security there?
Security was tight. I mean, tight. We had to go through 2 metal detectors in order to proceed down to the event itself down on the lakeshore at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was held outside on the stage there behind the museum, which if you've ever been to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, I mean, it is an awesome place to go to.
Oh, yeah.
But the concert venue out behind it on the lakeshore is just a spectacular place. And the Doobie Brothers performed. They did an awesome job. They really, really look old. But they still could sing, and they could still play some good rock. And, it was just an awesome time. And then afterwards, the fireworks show. Mr. Cupelli is known for throwing some good fireworks shows. But last night's fireworks show was really just constant big boomers, some really great fireworks that went solid for a half hour. I mean, there was not one dull moment at all in that. But, it was a packed locale last night. And like I said earlier, you had to walk to get down there. And where I had to go from the hotel that's Radisson there in downtown, just 2 blocks back from the arena, then 9 blocks down to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. It was a little lengthy of a walk, but the police officers and the other, law enforcement agencies that were there, Ohio State Police, the FBI, Secret Service, I mean, they are very noticeable, the FBI and the Secret Service. And, you knew exactly if you had an issue, you could go to one of those, and they are more than willing to help you. Very strong police presence. I wouldn't say force, but a good presence on hand. I mean, thousands of officers there. And usually there's probably about 6 on each corner of the intersection. That's how much police presence. And then you also had a cop that would be in the middle of the street where he could direct, the pedestrians to walk through, or if he needed to let one of the shuttles by or one of the buses, then, you could do that. But, I mean, security, is in real good shape. A lot of people think that there may be an event that could happen because of what's happened, as of recent down in Baton Rouge.
Of course.
But it won't be for lack of response time because, like I said, they have got a lot of law enforcement officials at every intersection in that 1 mile radius of downtown Cleveland and the Quicken Loans Arena.
We're talking with Sam Jordan, who's on the ground now in Cleveland at the Republican National Convention. One thing that's been causing, especially on social media, a lot of fervor is in Ohio, where, of course, Cleveland is. There's an open carry law. You can open carry with no problem. And the head of the police union, I'm wanting to say, if I'm not mistaken, actually asked Governor John Kasich, who himself was actually running for nomination in the Republican Party, to declare a state of emergency, to restrict open carry. That hasn't happened as far as I know now. But has there been, do you think that the situation might be exacerbated by protesters who are open carrying on the grounds now?
Well, I can say this, and I was, around the area quite a bit last night. The only time that you saw a weapon was on the hip of an officer. Didn't see anybody else that was not identified with the police on the back of, their vest or their jacket or uniform or anything like that. It wasn't really much of a presence. It was talked about and everything. And when we had updates and stuff throughout the day and evening last night, as well as this morning, we really didn't see a lot of that so far. I mean, that doesn't mean that it won't happen at some point, but even when I was down by the Black Lives Matters area where they were set up, you didn't see anything like that down there as well. And, it may be just overstated more than anything at the moment, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't see it, through the remainder of the convention day.
Sure. Yeah, anything could happen at this point, especially, everyone's sort of on edge after what we just had yesterday in Baton Rouge, what we've had in other locations too. Everyone's sort of on edge. That is interesting to clear up, though, because it seemed like, looking at the reports on Facebook, reports with air quotes on Facebook, it seemed like you couldn't walk 10 feet without some, redneck with an AR-15. And I no disrespect to rednecks, obviously. Another thing that we've had on social media that you keep seeing the photos of, very low res photos, of course, is the whole Bikers for Trump thing. The reports from supposedly people on the ground made it sound like there were millions of bikers who were causing havoc. What's your impression of Bikers for Trump at the moment?
They were making their way. There was a big event up in Erie, Pennsylvania, Thursday through Sunday, called Roar on the Shore, which basically was like a mini Sturgis, South Dakota, that was in the Northeast. And they were making their way down from Erie. I mean, we're talking probably about 5,000-6,000 bikers that were making their way from Roar on the Shore and going back to their various areas. But a lot of those headed down to Cleveland. And I would probably say, realistically, probably a little over 1,000 bikers that were in and around Cleveland. But, it wasn't really such a huge thing. I mean, as far as demonstration-wise or anything like that, it's just they were very quiet and peaceful for the most part. And wasn't really a big deterrent in any way, shape, or form, just more of a statement of their presence being there. But like I've said before, within a mile of Quicken Loans Arena or anything where the event's going on with the RNC, there wasn't any vehicular traffic. So that's why I'm saying it was kind of a quiet protest or statement being made here at the RNC.
So with that 1 mile radius, I guess that would include motorcycles as well. So there really couldn't have been much of a demonstration with bikers, other than you'd see a sea of leather, and that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, that was the bulk of it. I mean, they had their bike, positioned as near as they could get, but like I've said, many times here, within 1 mile of Quicken Loans Arena or anything of the facilities that are hosting events like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame or the other convention center type places in downtown Cleveland, no vehicular traffic whatsoever, other than what has been allowed as far as with the shuttles or public safety, police, fire, EMS. That's about it.
So out of the, we're talking with Sam Jordan, who's on the ground right now in Cleveland at the Republican National Convention. I imagine you've seen, you mentioned you talked to some of the delegates. What's your impression so far of the gentlemen you've spoken to and ladies as well you've spoken to?
A lot of them, feel like, they're comfortable with Trump. I mean, there's been some rhetoric that there may be, a ploy made for, another candidate possibly. But for the most part, everybody is, on the Trump bandwagon.
Or at least pretending to be.
It is what it is. We started with 16. It looked like we were going to have a 17th jump in there possibly. But, that didn't happen. But I think everybody's pretty much on board, even when you've got the political power people in D.C., finally gradually coming on board. I mean, they're still not totally happy, I don't think, with the Trump presumptive nomination, but it is what it is, as they say. But, in talking with the delegates last night, they're at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, they're there to get business done. They've got an agenda on hand as far as some particular issues that they want to work on. And Ryan Spriegus, the RNC chairman, wants to make sure that, those issues get taken care of by the 2,400 plus delegates that are there. And then the 2,300 alternate delegates from all the various territories and the District of Columbia and the 50 states, in trying to make America better again. And, it's a tall task, but, Cleveland is getting their turn right now, and Philadelphia will get their turn here before long with the Democrats. But, everybody's got their agenda and, trying to make America better again.
Man, that's, I guess you can't really blame them. That's just to be expected. People have different opinions. We've got about 3 minutes now, Sam. Are there anything else you want to mention that you've noticed so far at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland?
Just, a lot of good camaraderie, I guess you could say, as far as with people that haven't seen each other in a while and with the delegates, because with their identification that they have on, who the delegates are and stuff. And a lot of them, when you're kind of standing back a little bit, it's like, hi, I'm Joe Brown from Texas, and you're from what state? And they'll just kind of mingle and interact without really much fanfare of sorts. And, then they'll start talking about particular party views and stuff that they have on the different subjects. So, it's not a bad situation. I mean, like I said, the delegates have their own special identification that they have, and like us with the news media and stuff, we, have our own blue tags that we have. And like last night's event, we had a special ID badge that you had to have or you weren't getting in. And I know I was fortunate to be able to get mine, but it was based on a first come, first served basis. And they wanted to try to keep it to where they knew, certain individuals, because I had to go through a Secret Service check in order to be able to get credentials for this. So, they are very well scrutinizing every individual that's going to be in and around Cleveland. You really got to have a reason to be there.
Well, I'm glad you're there because I don't think I or my boss here would be able to make it through through the Secret Service check. We're a little bit inflammatory over here, but I'm glad you're on the ground. I'm glad you're doing what you're doing. Sam Jordan.
Yeah, I know Mr. Cupelli would have a very difficult time getting through on the Secret Service check, but that's a story for another day.
That's for another time. Maybe we'll get him on to talk about that sometime. Sam Jordan on the ground in Cleveland at the Republican National Convention. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll talk to you a little bit later in the week.
All right. Have a good day.
You too. That's Sam Jordan. He's on the ground at the Republican National Convention in Cleveland. We're going to be giving you reports from the ground in Cleveland throughout the week. We are extremely fortunate to have a reporter on the ground who actually did make it on the first come, first serve basis. It's been an extremely heated environment, although not as much as you might think listening to social media. Sam has indicated that it's really not as bad as we might have been led to believe, going based on media reports and going based on what people post on Facebook. They act like the open carry thing's been causing almost it to come to blows. It seems like Black Lives Matter versus the Bikers for Trump has been causing almost a race war in the Republican National Convention. From what we've heard from Sam Jordan, who's actually on the ground, who we can trust, it doesn't seem that way. It seems like albeit more high stakes, a pretty normal Republican National Convention with very high security, very scrutinizing there. Police seem to be doing a great job, Secret Service as well, and it takes a lot to get me to say that, so it's true. This is Binary here on Hot News Talk Radio, AM 1240, hotnewstalkradio.com. Colin Cowherd coming up next here on Hot News Talk Radio and hotnewstalkradio.com.